All right. Welcome back to the Failing Forward podcast, where we share stories about how we have failed forward in all aspects through our health, business, and relationships. And today we have an incredible guest speaker here, Dr. Conor Hogan, PhD. He is the world's leading high performance neuro social psychologist. He integrates neuro socio data and experiences by studying the mind and mental processes of individuals and organizations to facilitate higher performance. Dr. Conor, thank you so much for being here on the Failing Forward podcast.
It's great. It's absolutely fabulous to be here, Nikou. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And you have the most incredible accent. So for the audience that's wondering, where is this cool dude from? Where are you calling in from today?
Well, I don't know if I'm cool, but I'm in the west of Ireland. I'm in Galway, or some people call it or refer to it as Galway. And I'm actually only about 500 meters from the Atlantic Ocean. So next stop, New York.
Wow, that's incredible. So thank you so much for calling in from Ireland. We love it. I've heard you speak so many times in different rooms on different boards, and you are a wealth of knowledge and you have a story to tell, a story of how you failed forward in your health and how you failed forward in, really finding you and who you are today. So I'd love to share that story with the audience before we deep dive into some questions and pour some value into everyone about mindset and the brain and how to regain control of your life. But let's start with your story. Take us back. When did this all begin?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm getting older, as we all are, since the pandemic hit. So, yeah, actually, I celebrated my 40th just before the pandemic hit. So it's going back, I think, to my teenage years, um, where essentially I was playing sport. I'm a big, tall guy, first off, as an adult, 6'4" tall, so near on the 200-pound mark. Just big, strong guy. I was always that kind of build. So played sport. I was really good at sport, contact sport, team sports, and that was my love. That was my passion. And for me, I just wanted, the whole kind of avenue of sport to envelop me in my life and be part of playing sport. But when I was 12 years of age, 13 years of age, I started getting all these problems honestly, with my body. And I didn't know even what parts of my body because I was getting aches and pains. I can remember sitting down at school, and I must have been about 14, I think, at this stage, and just feeling, what we'd call aches and pains, and just everywhere, from my neck down to my ankle, my hip, my knee, everything. And yet here I was, ready to go out like within an hour or two and play more sport. But I just thought it was like growing pains. I'd heard that phrase at the time, growing pains. But it wasn't until a few years later, till I was I think about 17, 18, where I was eventually going to what we then called alternative therapists. Now you call them complementary therapists. And I, like, even at that stage, I had quite an eventful journey with going to different people. And they kind of said, I think there's something wrong with your spine here. I think you've got scoliosis. And then I went back to the medics because at this stage, even at 17, 18, I'd kind of walked away from the medics from a point of view of diagnosis and being able to kind of figure out what was causing all these problems. And so then I went the medical route, just essentially to get the official diagnosis, because I just knew that, like, I'd lost confidence, to be quite honest, in the whole medical profession. And so I went and I got referred to a specialist, and the specialist more or less said to me that, yeah, you have scoliosis, your spine is the way it is, it's not going to change, and you need to kind of get over it. And that was basically it. And you shouldn't play sport, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do. There's a whole lot of negatives, and inoperable. You wouldn't be operated anywhere. Now, at the time, the operation was two steel rods either side of your spine. So literally from your pelvic area up to your neck was two kind of very kind of prominent steel rods, would orchestrate your erect spine. So whatever twists were in the spine. So by the way, scoliosis is the case where, if you can imagine a spiral staircase and your spine being like that, or if you've got a clothes hanger and straightened it out in the palm of your hands to make it like as long as it could possibly be, and then twist it again in the form of a 3D S. That's the way scoliosis can affect. So it's not just when people actually look from, say, for example, behind or even in front if they're looking at their chest area, that it looks to be kind of the shoulders are offline or the hips are offline, but also your organs can twist with it. Now, our organs, as we know, say for example, our lungs are across from each other, they're more or less in the same, you know, area as one another. One is on the left, one is on the right. But if you twist them slightly, even a centimeter, there could be huge breathing problems, for example, people with scoliosis. And then doing exercise or things like that become really, really tricky. For me, at that time, 17, 18, I was picking up all these colds, flus. I think I had about 14 sore throats at the time. And I just couldn't figure out what was the problem with it all. And as I said, all these aches and pains were just getting worse. And there was all this, you know, even playing sport, I was like a big, strong guy. People looked at me, they thought I was lazy. But the reality was, when I wasn't training, practicing, I was actually away trying to do more things myself. Because the way a lot of us were brought up, especially men, at that stage in sports, it was like, you know, if there's something wrong, just get back up and do more. So the idea was I trained more and then I would work harder at myself to try and make the speeds that were expected in training and practice with the team, make the distances, lift the weights, all these things that are needed. And I just, you know, I couldn't do it. There was one particular exercise I remember where in 1995, there was a team here in Ireland in my sport that they were a team of bachelors. There was no great women involved, and they were the first team ever in over 100 years to win the competition. So everybody thought, okay, whatever they're doing, we're going to do. And those guys adopted a 180-meter hill where they would run up the hill, sprint up the hill, I think 25, 30 times in a row. And so they, the other teams around them didn't exactly have the 180-meter hill. So what they did was they adopted their 20-meter hills or their 30-meter hills and they put players up on other people's backs to be able to kind of run up the hill, the small hill. And they did it more times than say 25, 30 times to like have an adopted version of the training. And so me being the big guy, of course, I got the bigger guy coming on top of me. And so when I was doing the sprints ordinarily, and here's the funny thing, I was kind of running, sprinting, I was faster than anybody when it came to a straight out sprint. But when I put somebody or a weight on my back, I was all over the place. Like one leg was going one side, my body was going the other, all of this, and I'd lose. So this is when things started like kind of clicking with me. And hey, there's something wrong here. There's something not right. Now I mentioned before, like at 12, 13, I thought it was like my body, my aches and pains, my body. But honestly, looking back, it's like the awareness. We mentioned this word awareness so much, and I'm bound to mention it many times here. I know, Nikou, you too will understand what I'm saying. But even then, I didn't have an awareness literally of where certain pains were coming from and certain aches. And it wasn't until over the years, in my 20s and 30s, I started doing trial and error with all the learning I started doing after that, that I literally became the lab rat for all the things that I wanted to, well, I didn't realize it, but wanted to improve on. But also, I wanted to kind of, well, I knew I wanted to improve, obviously, but I wanted to use and utilize in my own career as well. So that was kind of the seed of it all, and also the destruction of it all as well.
That is such an amazing story. And I can relate to that so much because I also have scoliosis and it's not just lateral. Like some people look at
Yeah,
scoliosis, like you said, from the back, it's a bend to one side. It's also rotational. And when it becomes lateral and
mm,
rotational, you're changing the way the rib cage fits so that the ribs might be slipped over to one side and then one lung's being collapsed and the other side's not fully inflating because that other lung's weak. And then you're getting all these pressures down into the pain in the hips.
yeah,
And it's excruciating. And when you load the spine from the top, so you carry someone, or when you're holding a baby for
yeah,
women that have scoliosis, it's excruciating pain. It's shooting down your body. And a lot of people don't have that awareness that this isn't normal. Like something is off. And chiropractic was huge for me to help me realign my spine and then going and lifting and working out to help strengthen the muscles that were weak on the opposite side that was being compensated, right? Was very important. And then doing Pilates to stabilize the spine and to strengthen my core, to hold everything where it's supposed to be, and doing yoga to maintain that flexibility. I mean, this is what took me down my journey. So I'm so happy to hear that you
yeah,
figured out what was your ache and pain, because a lot of people live their lives not knowing that they have scoliosis, mild, moderate, or extreme. And that's what's affecting their ability to breathe. And if you're not breathing well, it's going to affect your cognitive ability, your brain function. It's going to lead to brain fog, right? It's all holistic. The whole entire system is all connected. So I love that you found that help. And that's probably what got you into all these courses, getting into chiropractic,
Yeah,
getting your bone back.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's like the way I looked at it at the time was, okay, as I said before, it was alternative health. I knew even at 16, 17 years of age that and look, I have fantastic respect for medicine. I have huge, I mean, look what's happening with the pandemic and so on. So, I mean, frontliners, nurses, doctors, they're amazing people. But even at 16, 17 years of age, I knew that whatever was going on with me, I wasn't aware, like you say, of the different areas of the body that you mentioned there. I wasn't even aware where the pains were coming from. But I knew that there was something deeper needed here. It was just a different way of healing that was needed here. And so that's what brought me down my journey to kind of obviously get the benefit for myself. But as I was doing that, like for example, I would be in a physical therapist room, and when you're lying, say, flat on your stomach, you're having all of these, like, what do? You converse with the person, right? If you're there for like a 1 hour thing, and then so I met these like fascinating people along the way who would have trained, for example, at one physical therapy, but would have met somebody in their training that was interested in something else, something to do, with, like you say, the mind. And that's when like you start thinking, and then that's where the kind of the key to the door to awareness started opening for me, because I'm like, all right, okay, that's interesting, because I kind of feel like that too. So maybe that what you're just telling me about somebody else you've trained with, or some other like therapy you're intrigued or interested in, maybe there's something to do with that. And of course, in 1997, that's when I was like 17, 1898, obviously. That's when the internet, believe it or not, was just coming in like to Ireland. We were like, I don't know, there's 50 houses in where we were living, and we were like first or second house. So it was like the old dial-up connection. So I started, utilizing the internet as my library to figure out, well, what were they saying and so on. And it became honestly like a hobby. So it was a therapy to try and help myself, but then it became a hobby and a therapy because I learned a few things and a few different therapies that helped me, what I would say, stitch me up. So I would like play sport for another couple of years. And like if I had a really hard session, I'd say, okay, I know now I need to go back to a certain guy or whatever and kind of get stitched up with this, get another kind of session, and so on. And then maybe next week I'll have to go back again because we've got another hard session next week or something like that. But then what happened was it was progressively getting worse for me. So by the age of 20, I was just done and dusted with sport. Now I didn't think it at the time. That was the end of the road for me. And literally I used all my 20s and all my money to literally invest in myself physically, mentally, everything. And I learned so much. And then somewhere along the line, early in my 20s, I decided, you know what? Instead of like stitching myself up, just going to places and going to people and therapists, which a lot of people do. And don't get me wrong, that's a wonderful thing to do. But I said, I really need to find out what the core of all of this is. So then I decided, made a conscious decision that instead of like just reading online, that I'm going to do a course in one of these things. And then one thing led to another because once you start doing one, you start going, that's really intriguing. And it's answered some of my questions and curiosities, but not every one of them because there's something still wrong with me. And then you start moving and shaking and you keep going, you keep going. Suddenly, years pass. And most of that time I use myself, my body, my human cycle, whatever else, to kind of just experiment. And there was times where I literally, I mean, I was so bad at times with my spine and my hips and everything that I was in bed at night and my hips would pop in and out of place. Even my ankles, all these different things. Like one therapist said to me, remember the old Budweiser ad on the television where you had all these kind of, can't remember the names of the horses, beautiful horses. And he said, like, you're like one of those horses. He said, like, you're just big and you're awkward and your feet, you can't even, your legs move and they're just like trying to carry your feet and your feet are just coordinated with your knees and hips and everything. And everything was just out of sync. And so, like, I just wanted to kind of, I utilized everything. I used my whole body, my whole mind just to try and power myself through. And then once I kind of thought, okay, I'm really improving here, then I deliberately put pressure on my body to, for example, and if the hip popped, it popped because I knew how to get it back in again. Now, don't get me wrong, there'd be pain there, but I literally had so much confidence in what I was doing and the methods I was using. And the thing about scoliosis, for example, it's very individualistic. Like people, even listening to this, if they come back to you and say, "Hey, I got scoliosis, help me," or they come to me, reality is it's really individualistic. You can have a curve of 45 degrees. or 50 degrees, or it can be one side of the body, left side of the body, and all of this. So and there's different types of scoliosis. There's idiopathic scoliosis, um, pediatric, and so on. So you can be born with it, or you can kind of idiopathic is you can get it. Usually it's like along the teenage years, and for actually just as you said, I think there's like times seven times more likely that females will get scoliosis more so than males for whatever reason. And yeah, so it's
A lot of it is postural. Like women, we carry
yeah,
a purse on one side, we carry our babies on one side. So we do it to ourselves by not balancing ourselves out. And then for me, I mean, it was a result of a car accident. So sometimes it's blunt force trauma that will reset
yeah.
the spine.
And it's good to know. It's actually good to know, like you say. Unfortunately, like the shock of that, and it is that's a huge thing because that goes into our nervous system, and it's stored that memory of exactly what has happened. And if you can, you have to re-educate essentially what's going on with the nervous system, right? And that's where the brain things and neural things can have huge impact. But also, like you say, postural. It could, and for people, sometimes it's just postural, and sometimes it's like it's neurological as well. And as I said, like if it's genetic, it can be genetic, but it can also it can also what's interesting about scoliosis, like I've done a lot of research on this over the years as well with other people. In fact, I was going to well, I had a book kind of partially written before the pandemic, but that's a long story short on that. And it was to do with scoliosis. I was going to give a lot of it to charity and stuff like that. But I had interviewed a lot of people and researched how their individual kind of happenings and occurrences with scoliosis that occurred. But what I found out as well is that there's a lot of different people can be born with this and have other issues as well. A lot of other issues, even autism, for example. You'd never think that there's a relationship between something physical like scoliosis with a twisted spine and someone who's autistic, but there is. There's quite a lot of occurrences of that as well. So there's all different things. Sometimes it can be just a symptomatic thing that's something deeper going on. But I like what you said earlier on. I'll bring it back to that is that this whole system, our minds, brains, bodies, everything, the people we're around, like we're all like one organism, right? It's all holistic. And the thing about the kind of traditional medicine in general, they look at, okay, I go in with a cramp, here's a tablet, go home. And the tablet's strong, don't get me wrong, it might help the cramp, but it can also have a side effect as well. So we have to start looking at the whole being. And until we do that and everybody does it together, we're going to have a lot of pains in this world. So the more awareness, the more conversations, and the more reaching out that we can all do, we can all help each other. I think, and all these new diseases that are coming in the world, I sure as heck don't know where they're coming from. By the way, I'm not a medical doctor, and but I don't want to be either, because with respect to what all they know, it's fantastic. But there's so much other learning out there as well from other areas that we really need to be open to.
I love that. And I want to amplify what you just said because it is true. Medical doctors, they're highly specialized in what they've studied. So you go to school and you learn about, the cardiovascular system, like you're a specialist in that. But then when someone comes to you with a problem, you're only thinking in that lens. You're only thinking from that focus. You might not be thinking, this issue with their heartbeat and what's going on with their heart might be coming from a postural issue where their body is just off. And if we can get their body better, right? Their spine straightened out and everything, their heart's going to work better. Or maybe this person's under a high amount of stress, their cortisol levels are off the charts, and that's going to cause blood pressure to go up too. So, I love doctors. I think they're great. But what I found from my own experience is that it's a narrow focus. It's looking at a problem from one lens and not from multiple perspectives. You have to look at the situation as, okay, this person's coming to me, they're experiencing pain, or they're experiencing an issue with an organ, or they're experiencing issue with their skin. Let me look at the whole body system. Physically, what does the exercise look like? Mentally, what are their thoughts? Let's take a look at their neurotransmitters. What are those levels at, right? Then let's take a look at their emotions, like how are they feeling? And and really kind of come down to, okay, what's off? Because that's what holistic health coaching is all about. It's creating balance through all four modalities: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and then finding out, okay, you have a heart condition. That heart condition may not actually be an issue with your heart. Yes, it is an issue now, but that may have been caused by years and years of executive burnout, cortisol levels being high, acetylcholine being high, serotonin being low, experiencing some depression. Like, all these things are going to affect our organs and tax our organs and tax our system and our mind. And I love that you said that. Like, we need to all come together and looking at it from a broader perspective and not through such a narrow focused lens. Thank you for sharing that. That was very powerful. So I have a question for you. I'm looking at your courses: advanced osteopathy, right? Mastery. And then you also had the Bowen therapy. Can you speak to those two very quickly for someone that might be experiencing some physical pain, specifically from a spinal standpoint, and what those two therapies can do? 2 seconds.
Well, first of all, you've done a lot of research. I didn't expect you to be talking about those things, to be quite honest. But yeah, a lot of courses I put up. I mean, I'll add to, and I'll also, I mean, I certainly need to do more courses. There's times when I'm like, oh God, I need to put up other stuff and, update them as well. Um, but these are things along the way. I did a lot of, when I say complementary stuff, and as I said, alternative stuff at the time, I, I went everywhere. I went to every type of therapist. And then with a lot of those courses, I've kind of put in my experiences of them as well as the theory that's going on there. Um, I would always say, by the way, go to your medical doctor first if you have anything wrong with you, obviously, because both legally and also, look, they have huge. There's no doubt they have huge knowledge, but it's just the whole system. Unfortunately, can be a little bit outdated in some ways. But individual doctors can be fantastic. There's no doubt about it. Once you get that information, you're best served then at going to someone complementary, because once they, like, for example, if you get a scan and you go to a chiropractor or an osteopath, you mentioned osteopathy, right? They'll know whether this or that has been done with your body. You've had an operation, or they can read it straight away. Some of them are really, really good at looking at X-rays or scans or things like this. And once they realize that, then they can begin to kind of use their power as well as their skills to manipulate the fascia in your body and manipulate all the different areas so that, you know, you're not just limited by certain movements that they do, because they understand from their point of view which part of the body is linked to the other part. So if you, for example, in the chiropractic, a lot of the times you go in and there's like, I think, 10 or so types of sessions that are needed. So you might go in with a hip problem and suddenly come out with a perfect hip. It feels great, but then your neck is kind of dodgy. And you're like, oh, well, hold on. My neck was, but the plan from the chiropractic science point of view is that, well, we have to kind of heal one area, and that might upset the other area. But that's why we have 10 sessions here, because in their science, it's like a holistic batch of sessions that will make you feel better, realign the system, shock it into kind of submission, and then re energize it, and so on. So that's their own science. Then osteopathic is kind of different, where it's a little bit kind of kinder in the way the manipulations are done. Um, there's slight differences in all of these things. Bone therapy, all of them. So what I did is I went to all of these different things, these different places and different therapists, and then you have to decipher, by the way, between who's a good therapist at a brilliant therapy, or like a not so good therapist at a brilliant therapy. So you'll find that a lot of the times it's like a smidging of, it's like a meal, a beautiful meal. For you to cook, I don't know, a chicken casserole, and for someone else to cook a chicken casserole, one is a brilliant chef, the other one not so much. Obviously, you're the brilliant chef, but you know, whatever ingredients you put in to that particular meal, it's like going to, different therapies, and you learn things, be it as a patient, as a client, or as a person who's instructing it as well. So in my courses, I just put in basically all the theory that I knew to be, and all my experiences as well, just to try and help people. And that's, it became a hobby as well, because one of the other aspects of my world, I was a teacher. And so that's when I kind of left off there in my early 20s. I started teaching. So I became a primary school teacher, which is an elementary school teacher in the States, and then a secondary or post-primary or high school teacher as well. And then I fell into the world of behavioral teaching. And this was really, really interesting to me. And some of the things I kind of fell into that as I was doing other work in the evening time. So single guy, I was like doing all these courses and kind of using myself as a lab rat, self-improving myself. I got to a state then on, okay, I'm good now. I feel really, really good. Like I can play sports now and I can do all these things and I can keep fit and so on, all my hobbies. But I want to like give back. I want to be able to kind of use this. And by the way, I grew up in a golf course. That was our home business. That's a whole nother thing. So like sport was in my DNA as such. We had a golf course business, and from the ages of 12 or 13, I was out like playing golf, and I was helping people out, and business wise and everything, all
My
of that.
husband would love you.
Yeah, so that was the way it was. And then like it was beautiful because my summer day was really cool. It's like get up in the morning, 100 meters away from our home house was this golf course, and we'd just go down, open it up, and we'd have a few old age pensioners coming in, and treat them well and make some coffee for them, talk about golf, turn on the TV, watch the tennis or golf or whatever other tournament was on in sport. And it was all like a sports bar, except it was like a sports cafe and golf course. Then there was like golfers coming in and out, helping them, giving them golf clubs, going out then and raking bunkers, cutting down trees or trimming back hedges, all the time talking. And then you're going out and you're guiding people along golf courses, like rangering them, telling them, that hole is busy. There's three or four groups there. Go to the next hole. And then in the evenings, I was going off playing sport myself, contact sport. So like it was an idyllic. It was beautiful. And then we had a sea, a beach up the back of us. We go swimming. So like it was active, 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 outdoors all of the time. And so what I utilized then when I became a behavioral school teacher, what I loved about that was the whole behavioral part of it. Wasn't, and even psychology, I was like, okay, that's cool. But people say to me, oh, cognitive, you must have loved all of that. Because I thought everything. I thought everything. I thought maths, I thought, and I think of cognition and understanding maths. And I wasn't the greatest mathematician or learner of maths when I was in school. But what I learned from when I was doing my homework as a frustrated child was that, I'd always complete something. And with mathematics, you'd always run into problems. And I always thought, well, I did, what, I'll go to the school the next day, and if the teacher doesn't like my answer, I don't really care because look at all of the pages I've used up here and all the different ways I've tried to do all these mathematical problems, and I failed. But I didn't really care. And because, maths wasn't my thing. But when I came to become a teacher, I loved how people learned and I loved how they perceived information. And of course, then how they behaved because of that. So I started doing all other courses, by the way, and I started working privately myself in the evenings. Then I was in the behavioral school, and I was going from like, what is wrong with these children? Why are they acting up? Children who were suicidal at 7 or 8 years of age, children who were like anorexic, children who had just a variation of emotional behavioral issues. And then in the evenings, I started working like physically with people, but also mentally with people. Again, problems, issues. How can I solve these problems? And I loved all of that because everybody is individually different. And like we learn so much, and science is based off all different sciences. Go back to courses, for example. They're all based off knowledge of what we already know. 1,000 people did this, therefore we do that. Therefore we teach them this way. Therefore we all. But everybody is different. And neurologically, there's crossovers with everything. So I'm a little bit autistic. I'm also a little bit ADHD. I'm also a little bit probably charismatic. And these are things that shouldn't be mixed with, for example, somebody who's autistic or has ADHD primarily. But, you know, we are all a cocktail of different things. And the people we are around really are so, it's been said a million times, you are the sum of the five people you're around all of the time. It's so true though. And it doesn't even take five or 10 or three. If you are on your own and if you can be positive, do the right things and grow. Growth is huge in my book. Once you can do that, you'll accelerate in whatever field you're in.
I love that. And you helped co-author 4 books on mental health. So you've
Yeah,
definitely gone through that similar experience. You have your PhD in
yeah,
sociopsychology and you have a postdoctorate degree in neuroscience. Can we
yeah,
deep dive into the brain and deep dive into mental health? Because especially right
yeah,
now with the pandemic, so
yeah,
many people are
absolutely.
dealing with isolation, they're dealing with confusion, they're dealing with trying to find a new identity, and and we're suffering. So let's talk
Yeah.
about the brain. Let's talk about mental health. Pour into us, give us some value. How can we get through these times of isolation?
Yeah. So the first thing like in psychology generally is, first off, psychology and neurology, they can be quite different, right? To be very elite about each and every one of them, the psychologists traditionally don't like want to be called neurologists, and neurologists don't want to be called psychologists. They're all different. But that's, the reality is though, they're two sides of the one coin in many ways, right? Because at the end of the day, I can only use what I know for myself. So if I learn from psychology or learn from the neurology part of things, I have a different, for example, shaped brain probably than you. I perhaps am more attuned to using my brain in a different way if, for example, I'm sporting, if another person is not. So we're rewiring our brain all of the time. Now, from the psychological point of view, they would say that if, hypothetically, if a pandemic did come and we're all left to stay at home or forced to stay at home for over a year for most people in this world, which has happened now, is that the habits that you kind of do day to day in that 1 year period are going to dictate the rest of how you kind of integrate with society and the rest of your working world from there on in. So after pandemic then finishes. And it's the exact same, funny enough, on the other side of the coin with the neurology of things, because there's this thing called, as we know, neuroplasticity. So the things that we do, and at the times even of the day that we do them, the habits again that we have started off doing by force, more than likely, for example, working at home and so on, more so than working in an office. In many ways, it's very, very difficult to get out of them. So I'll throw it back to you, for example, Nikou, in this, and this is an example. If we think of a real world, you've had children, right? So you mentioned pregnancy. Obviously, when a woman goes 9 months with something growing inside them, you mentioned posture and all these different things. I'm sure for you as a human being, even though like you're fit and you're extremely driven with regard to improving and all the things you've learned, I'm sure there's differences in you as a being now because of 9 months having a child inside and growing inside of you than prior to that. So your mind and your thinking is reflected by that experience. And the reason, as we know, say, for example, from pregnancy, like there's huge chemical imbalances that can occur during a pregnancy. And one of those things, of course, naturally enough, is you've got a growing being inside of you. So as you intake nutrition and food and the amounts of food, that little sucker is actually taking it from you. So you're going to be depleted in some ways by energy, your bloods are going to change and everything. So that's not rocket science. But it's the same way with something happening in the likes of a something like a pandemic. If but the thing about it is, we all individually think from it, and I'll pop it back to you with this one, uh, with regard to the pregnancy, because I sure as heck can't say anything about that. I'll tell you that much. But like a lot of people right now are thinking, and even as they're going back into society, gosh, I hope people don't see my hair, or I haven't styled it in a year, or
Mm,
gosh, I hope people don't know the things I was doing, or that I wasn't exactly going to bed at 9 p.m. every night,
yeah.
or I was watching too much Netflix, or I didn't spend that extra time doing X, Y, and Z like I told my friend I would do right before the pandemic. But the main thing to remember is that just because you haven't seen anybody or your friends or your work colleagues or even society or gone to a concert or a big football game, everybody individually has had to deal with this more or less on their own.
Yeah.
If we go back to the word awareness, you're forced to be aware of things that you were not aware before. A CEO client of mine has said to me a couple of times, one sentence, they said to me, I am I'm so sick of walking around the same area of my house all of the time. Now, if you saw where this person lives, it is idyllic, it is beautiful. I'm like, are you serious? Like, I mean, come on, there's people that would die for that area. Get me back to work is his thing. Second thing is like, he's like, I I I just cannot wait to be back with people, the fun, the banter in the office. Now that second one makes perfect sense, but everybody is in the same thing. Everybody is individually trying to get aware of things. He's also said to me, now that I think about it, about he has this fascination with ivy going on at the moment. Did you know there's a lot of ivy on the trees? And I'm like, yeah, there's been ivy growing on trees for a long time. Now, this is a very intelligent guy, but he wasn't aware of it before. Now that when he's on his walks, he's like, oh, look what's happening, you know? So this awareness, and we talk about trees and nature and herbs, and you guys call it herbs, all these things. These are beneficial to us. These are the things that nature has given, but we're so broken away from what is in front of us on our doorstep. So all the things that have benefited us in work, like computers and technology and all of that, fast pace of life, we need to slow down, we need to smell the roses, and we need to integrate the goods and the bads from the modern society with the old society. Like we said, medicine is good, but take the goods from it and learn from the other complementary things that are out there. So I'll shoot it back to you on the pregnancy thing.
Oh my gosh, I'm like, where do we begin? Everything that you said about awareness and presence, being present in the moment, because I just realized the other day I went outside to play with Kai and I was like, oh wow, these bushes are blooming these beautiful purple flowers. They've probably been blooming for weeks now. I didn't even realize it. And I've been outside every single day and I don't even see it because we're so into our technology. We're into our phone. We're into our email. We're into our business. We're into trying to be perfect at whatever we're doing. Right. And perfectionism in and of itself is a disease. And it's one that I'm trying to break myself. Like you saw today, everything didn't go perfectly. And that's okay. And you have to sit there and just say, it is what it is. It's not
Yeah,
perfect, but it's part of my experience. It's part of my journey. It's part of my story. So with pregnancy, 100% everything that you said is so true. When I was pregnant with Kai, the first trimester, it was challenging as most are. I didn't have the worst morning sickness like most, but I was tired and my mood was definitely disrupted. Like my body knew something was changing. My hormones were changing. The chemicals were changing. There was something that was literally growing inside of me. And that caused me to feel some depression. And then second trimester was great. Third trimester was fine. But then from a scoliosis standpoint, that third trimester, as the baby kept growing, there was more pressure being put on my hips, on my pelvis, on my spine. And I was starting to have a lot of issues with chronic low back pain, neck pain. I actually had a situation called PSD, pubic symphysis dysfunction, where the muscles of my pelvic floor were literally trying to split my pubic bone apart. So that was fun. I had to go through that. And then you have the baby, and then you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're like, whoa, this is not my body anymore. I felt like a person in a different body. So then there's this whole emotional, psychological, mental thing going on where I'm trying to find myself in my new body, right? I'm trying to find the old body in the new body. And then you're going through sleep deprivation. Here's a newborn that's not sleeping, right? They sleep for 30 minutes to 90 minutes at a time. So you're up all the time. And then that sleep deprivation starts to lead to very, very low mental clarity. So brain fog is real. Mom brain is real. Not remembering, did I brush my teeth today or did I not? And that taxes you. All of that taxes you. And I feel like the pandemic is so much the same as a woman that goes through pregnancy. We're put in a situation that's completely out of our normal experience. We went from being interactive, seeing people, communicating with people, going out and feeling carefree. And I shouldn't say carefree in a way of like, I'm not paying attention. I'm just like living freely, but we're not worried about, oh my gosh, if I touch that door, am I going to get sick? Oh my gosh, if I'm within 6 feet of that person, am I going to catch whatever they have? Like there's so much fear right now when we're trying to reintegrate and go back out and be around people again that we didn't have that fear before. We were more carefree. That's what I mean by that
mm,
fear. And it's been really interesting seeing how businesses are having to function differently. A lot of businesses aren't going back to in person. They're staying virtual.
yeah. And it's funny you should say that because it's like there's a level playing field now at the moment as well. And even if a person has been, first off, this whole mental health terminology, there's no doubt about it. People kind of see it and they go, oh, therefore they have a problem, right?
Yeah.
But if you, from my point of view, you have to be completely mentally well in order to then start improving, be that business or sport or performance or anything else, right? So a lot of the ways and a lot of the people I deal with now are high performers. The point is, they can have an issue when they're on, for example, 80,000 people in sport, right? They're used to that. They can perform at that, no problem. But then they have an issue going on in a relationship that they just can't figure out, and they could be the toxic link between that relationship not prospering, and yet After like playing sport in front of 80,000 people, they can do it every week. But the 11th week, they just can't do it. And it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? That seed has been set in the way you're treating people, and it will get back into your mindset as well, right? So when you speak of, like, say, pregnancy and the chemical differences, we can make chemical differences and a positive mindset, positive mindset, by re-engineering how our brains feed our minds and how we feed our feelings into and integrated into our body, coming from our thoughts, right? So they're all interrelated. So if we're coming out of a pandemic, if you have not achieved in life, if you have felt, oh, you know what, I've hit a certain age and I cannot do this because of that, or I don't have enough money, that's gone now. This is the perfect time, even if you have not put in 1 year solid of doing habitually great things, getting up early in the morning, doing a fantastic morning time routine, doing wonderful things that will lead you to become the person you want to be or achieve those levels that you know is inside of you. Now is the time. It's a level playing field because everybody is going to react differently to the new world. Let's call it the new world, the new society. I heard yesterday, for example, where somebody was like, oh, getting their second vaccine, and yet they had to go into a store and still were ordered to put on a mask. Now, it is what it is. We don't know what's the future. Like, generally in this world, we can't figure out where things came from or what exactly happened. But what we can control is ourselves, and we can control to kind of reach for the stars and put in the work, and that's where you'll get the best benefits from it all. But remember, everyone around you is coming from the point of view of, I've had a year out, I haven't seen people, I'm working from home, it doesn't exactly suit me. If they haven't improved like 100% more so than they have done, well, it's a level playing field. You can get to wherever you want to go. The different parts, it's like a domino effect in your brain, mind, body, working together. You get them all switched on and working together, and you'll be shocked at how forward, you call it falling forward, how falling forward you can go and how quickly you can get there. You really have to have the right people around you. You really have to know exactly what you want, and even the right people will help you find out what that is. But there can be and will be a chemical reaction to this. It's just up to you whether you want it to be positive or negative.
That was incredibly powerful. And I wrote down so much from what you just said. I want to come back to what you said about how we can re engineer how our brains feed our minds, which then our minds feed our feelings and our emotions. It's
Mm.
all interrelated. How do you believe we can become mentally well for those of us that are struggling right now? Do you have a few tips or tricks or things that we can start to implement right now to re engineer our brains?
Yeah, so as you are well aware, right, you've got this thing in our brain called the reticular activating system, right? And not to become very technical on it, but it's embedded into our brain. It's there. Thankfully, every, shall we say, neurologically normal child that's born has this embedded into their brain. But what it does is it seeks consciousness of what is happening in front of us. So it is conscious of whatever all the other parts of our brain and our mind perceive is happening out there. So if we go and walk down the street and we see, I don't know, 10 people coming towards us, because we're on a certain street in a certain state at a certain time of the day or night, we might perceive those 10 people as being, if they're, for example, male in stature, we might perceive them as being harmful. But there's no fact to that. In another state, on another street, with, for example, better buildings around, a brighter day at a different time of the day, these males could be seen as, 10 athletes that are doing charity work or something like that. And we perceive their approach differently. So the, all people that you're like going out into society now, what you perceive and how you feed back the other areas of your brain, and that's where the feelings come from. So when we think of anxiety, perhaps there was a lot of talk at the start of this pandemic with regard to PTSD, there's going to be post-traumatic stress with this, and anxiety disorders such as social anxiety. That can happen with the athlete, the performer who was performing in front of like 80,000 people, or the person who was a professional speaker right before this. They can go out now, and if their perception is going to be pushing them towards, you know what, I haven't had this in a while, this level of attention, or those people there wearing masks because they're a little bit paranoid of. We don't know why people are wearing masks if they're, whether they've been, for example, get the second jab or not, or whatever different vaccine they've got. We don't know who's linked to them and their families. We don't know their underlying conditions. Our perception is we think we know. The facts from before 2020 are now no longer, right? So what we feed ourselves now is what we're. So what I'm saying here is that mental health, it's natural that you're going to go out and you're going to be a little bit kind of not so much your personality, your pre-pandemic personality, where before I was a little bit kind of more enthusiastic about things, or I was a little bit more kind of extroverted. That's okay, because people's reactions to you, remember, they're back at home for so long too. They're not used to laughing. They're not used to socializing. They're not used to even working in social ways. So give them a time too. But it's your perception of what's going on will actually allow your brain to feed the feelings, and then that makes your body feel well. You mentioned cortisol levels, stress levels, and so on. So how we integrate back into society is crucial, obviously, but it's not just for our mental health. It's how we perform in our jobs. It's how we perform if we start a new business. It's how we perform in our sport. It's how we perform on stage or whatever else. So it's about using the perception, and it's a fresh perception. Just acknowledge other people are in this. Empathy, just empathy for other people in their way, is as powerful now as the facts of pre 2020. So I mean, you can go forward now. You're going to have this, how would I say it, this this like newness, like freshness of anxiety. That's going to be there. But how you perceive what you want your future reality is going to be, you're at the starting line again. It's a level playing field, and you can kick on through this like starting position of social anxiety that's going to exist, but it doesn't have to exist too long for you. You can become the joker in the room now. You can smile when other people are not smiling, because everybody has been locked away for a long time. So I hope that kind of answers this. I think I've delved a little bit
Yeah.
deeper, but not exactly gone to the root of it either.
No, I love it. And I think the main things that I'm hearing now from my friends, my family, my clients is they're
Yeah.
dealing with depression or they're dealing with anxiety. And I love what you said about perception. It's all about your perception and how you're perceiving the situation around you. What are things that you are doing and you have done to help change your perception?
Yeah, it's really good. You know what? Just before this, I was actually a couple of hours before this chat. I was talking to a guy I know, and he was he's a construction worker, right? And I wanted to get a bit of work done outside and stuff. So I hadn't seen him in like a year and a half. And we used to kind of socialize together. And of course, here he comes along with his big yellow coat and his like construction boots and so on. And I was wearing like a t-shirt. I'm like just like after dinner, I'm like walking towards him, wearing a pair of jeans, whatever. It's actually shorts, believe it or not. And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, you're different." And I'm like, "Well, you're used to when? Perceive me when?" He goes, "Oh, well, usually like on a weekend socially." Yeah, Saturday night. Saturday night is different. Here I am wearing like, shorts and a t-shirt. But going back to awareness, he wasn't even aware that he doesn't wear a yellow coat when he goes into a bar or into a pub or whatever else on a Saturday night. He doesn't wear construction boots. So, like, honestly, I think it's really, really important to show other sides of yourself now as well. Because, like, we met, for example, on Clubhouse. Clubhouse is a fantastic thing. Before even this particular chat here right now, I thought it was going to be audio only. So now I'm kind of conscious, more so since I started, of how I look, but you have to show the truth now. You have to be very real with people. And I really do think it's a new dawning. So I'm like concentrating for myself on just, being a bit more real. Um, Not trying to be anything I'm not, which I was never before. I was never before. I perceive, there it is again. But I need to kind of use, again, empathy. Ask people. I think that's a very good thing as well, good tactic. Ask people, how are you feeling? And I said to that guy, I said, how are you feeling? Like, how are things? How how are your parents? How is everybody home? You know, and just really, really, really doing that, because there's one true thing with all of this is that you've experienced it. I've experienced it. Before all of this, people would have said, I have this ailment, I have this problem. I've mentioned my problems. But if you put it all in context, what we've all gone through in the last year has been as big, if not bigger, than most people's worst experiences in life. But everybody has felt it. So empathy allows you to put yourself in their shoes, get to a certain point of conversation with them and say, hey, how have you been? No, like break it down for me. I know you've got parents over 70 and you waited for a vaccine. Okay, they're cool, or grandparents or whatever else. But like, how have you been? Like, what have you spent your time at? Like, and it's okay. Maybe rephrase the question like, okay, did you waste time in this last year? And you probably get a more positive answer. Empathy, just understanding where they're coming from. Because that's like, if you're, talk about sport, you cannot just go out and say, okay, we're all going back now at 7 p.m. We're going to do our practice. Before the pandemic, we did it for 2 hours. We'll do it for 2 hours now. We're going to do it firstly a warm up, then we're going to go into the tackles, then we're going to whatever else. If you don't put in place there in that 2 hour session, an area for how are you, and how can we do something different, because that person has been at home for 12 months thinking about the sport or not thinking about the sport, thinking about themselves or not aware of things. So it's a different world now. So people like me, people like you, what you do, if big companies, big, sporting teams, organizations, if you want to get ahead, if you want to compete, these soft skills have to be put to the front now. If you want to get ahead and compete, be kinder to people. It's the only way, because whatever has happened that wound us all up, the world, into a pandemic, it's coming from a human being. And other human beings, including all of us who are alive on this planet today, have stood by and watched it happen. Why? More than likely, we weren't aware of what was happening, but it was happening. Go back to the reticular activating system. Just for example, if they say it was airplanes, we were all flying too much. Fine. Horrible on the environment, I know. Therefore, in the future, we have to fly less. Okay. But we all still got hopped on a plane X amount of times over X amount of years. And we never once stopped and went, well, maybe this is bad for the environment. And therefore it will activate on my lifestyle in the future. So the awareness of now and the perception of time of now, I could go on about this, but I hope it's not too,
No, I
ins
think
and
it's
outs.
perfect. And I want to go deeper.
Yeah,
I actually want to dive deeper because I
yeah,
know there are people that are listening right now and they're saying, okay, I get it. It's perception. Okay, I get it. Be empathetic
yeah,
towards others. But how can I portray empathy for someone when I'm feeling sad? I'm feeling down. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling like I'm having a heart attack because my
yeah,
anxiety is so high. So, how do
yeah,
we help that person that's listening, that's saying, I can't even
yeah.
be around people right now because I am so heavy under my own
That
feelings
is a
and emotions?
brilliant question, because there's a point. Look, for example, talk therapies, right, are fantastic, but a lot of them only work like 60% of the time.
Yeah.
And the other part of the time, for example, sometimes it's a case of the reason why they don't work so well is because people are rehashing all of the horrible experiences they've had. So through speech and talk and listening and so on, and it's like it's too much. I don't want to go there, because yeah, you brought me down the rabbit hole of what happened in my past, that horrible time, and now I feel worse.
Yeah.
So how is that helping me? That's true. So there's an energetic field that, like, our brains are incredible, right? By the way, there's so much known about the brain science nowadays, which is fantastic. The last 20, 30 years has just been amazing. The next 20, 30 years is going to be absolutely incredible. However, do I believe that we're going to find out everything? No, I don't believe so. because
Yeah.
there's something very special in human beings.
Hmm.
You know, the Chinese call this chi, life. It's a life force. The Japanese call it ki. Even different languages, different cultures, different countries have, but whatever it is that drives us, we can only go so far with people. We can communicate, but words, as we know from body language point of view, you know, showing empathy cannot just be in words only and in tones of voice, in asking questions, but it needs to be also in the energy we emit to people. So there's no point saying, right, I'm feeling not so great. So I've heard that if you use empathy, therefore it will help you. Okay, but I'm not feeling so great. Then don't like, then you need to get to the point of view of getting yourself right first before you start delving deeper with somebody else.
Yeah.
And like this past year, a lot of people again may have spent time alone, but was it constructive? And I'm not talking about like building, you know, houses or becoming the greatest version of yourself or anything like that. I'm talking about, are you aware of how good or how bad you are at something? Are you aware of are you honest with yourself? What really makes you happy, what builds that energy in yourself. And it can come in a moment. You don't have to have a year in a desert and be meditating for all of that. Some people do need meditation, there's no doubt about it. Some people, it will activate all of these different things and awareness there for sure. But if you're aware of what your best energy is, bring that best energy to the person. You don't have to be a psychologist or a counselor to be able to ask them questions and delve into that to get to that empathetic point of view. But if you bring the good energy, people will know. They'll know through a smile, they'll know through good eye contact, they'll know through just, even saying, I know. Just tell me about your year, and listening for a while, and then I know. And make no judgment on it. Because people are just getting it off their chest. And then that's fine. But it's the energy you're giving to them. Okay, let's switch the energy. Let's go for a walk now. Let's go for a drink or whatever else. Let's have fun for now. So you don't like you never. It's I think it's one of these things in many ways, unless you've had a horrible death, and a lot of people have had that, and there's interconnections with lack of funerals, lack of saying goodbye to people, and horrible things that have happened the last year. But I honestly think there's going to be a part of that that's really difficult to heal right now, even if you see your friends. It's going to take time. It's going to take so much time, and but for now, for healing yourself, use your brightest energy. Pep yourself up with how and what makes you feel good. Be around that person. Just listen for a while. Address it with them. Other than the vaccine and all the uh, social distancing, if you can, a hug. Honestly, a hug is going to be the new, medicine, and it is a medicine
Mhm.
because just people, you can't fake a good hug,
Yeah.
right?
You feel it. It's
And
an energy exchange.
absolutely, absolutely. But don't go in, certainly do not go into like empathy. Don't use it as a kind of if I put myself in the shoes of the other person, therefore I can get the information and then I can use it in my point of view. That's destroying good energy.
Yeah.
If you're cognitively thinking and constructing and planning and scheming and manipulating and thinking, I'll show them good and then I'll get something else and get me ahead. No, a person will know that. There's no room now for any fakeness. You got
Yeah.
to be authentic. And I
100%.
believe, yeah, and that's when the real healing will begin. That's when it will sustain. And choose people, whatever business you were doing, whatever work you were doing, choose the people more so than the topic to do that business with, because it's
I
the
have to
people can
repeat
change.
that.
Yeah,
Choose the people, not the topic.
yeah. I mean,
Oh my
look,
gosh.
well, I mean, look, industries have changed. Look at the airplane industry, the airline industry. And like for example, there's a huge big airline here in Ireland, and their thing was like cheap seats, right? You just get what you pay for. It's like 19.99. You get like cheap seats. They bought a whole flight of airlines maybe 6 months into the pandemic, and they got them cheap. They thought we'll sell them off now, and then they put a big ad on the television for like 19.99 for whenever you get out of this pandemic, you can fly overseas, 1999, anywhere. That's fantastic. But like, we don't know where that industry is going. I saw something even last night about the jet industry and how it might change and so on. Um, so in 3 years' time, there might be a comeback for airlines, but in 3 years' time, it might be different again. They're talking about new pandemics and so on and so forth. So my point is, like, people can change. We've all changed things in the last year. A lot of people have had to work at different things. There's people doing courses now, and they'll requalify. They'll thankfully find what they're better at than what they were doing before. But it's the people you need. Look at the people that rang you up 1, 2 months into this pandemic and just said, "Hey, how are you? Can I help?" Those are the people, the real people that you need around you. It's not what qualifications they have. It's not what they were giving to you before, uh, from their, work expertise or something like that. It's the
Yeah.
people. The people can. Anybody who's coming out of this, you might feel beat up, mentally affected, but guess what? Everybody is the same way. It might show it, but everybody has been just completely bereft of any type of good emotional energy, contact, company, and so on. Everybody has felt the same way, rather than like looking at a piece of plastic with a lens on it, a zoom or whatever else. This is
Yeah.
not the same as a hug, right? This is not the same as a firm, honest handshake. We know that. Choose the right people to be around it. And if you have to break relationships now's the time to do it.
I love that.
Sayonara.
Connection is so important. When
Yeah,
we're talking about mindset, we're talking about the brain, we're talking about emotions, we're talking about psychology. But one thing that keeps coming back is awareness and connection, awareness and connection.
absolutely. Yeah. I
We
mean, we were
need
at
to,
there's a book there a few years ago. I'm sure you've read it, A New Earth, right? I think it was Eckhart Tolle. It's a great book. And if people have the last couple of weeks or months before they break out into society, read it. I think you'll love it. It's a long time since I've read it, but I honestly believe that you personally, if you're listening or watching this or whatever else, and if you're feeling on the cusp of, I'm not enough, things have changed, I don't have enough money, um, my social anxiety or PTSD is ramping up or whatever else, read this book. Put put it into your kind of psychology going forward with regard to the new earth is here, insofar as how you shape it for yourself as well. We're at the starting line again. Everybody's at the starting line, no matter who was famous or who was a celebrity or who was whatever else. It doesn't really matter, because everybody has to react to this now. And you're better off with one good person in your life that can grow. And if they can grow, they can Google. Why? Because there's huge information on Google. Therefore,
yeah.
if they're open minded enough to help you out, you too, with them, will find the answers to whatever other problems you have in this world. And that person will be loyal to you along the way as well. So, better have, like, think it as a spring clean. And if you do, then this time is going to be a very, very good time as you approach into this, I hope, new earth, new world we're having.
I love that perspective. Think of it as a spring cleaning, out with the
Yeah.
old, in with the new, and you get to choose how you show up. You get to
Yeah.
choose your perspective on the situation. I'm looking at it like a clean playing field, a blank slate. It's
Yeah.
you do art therapy. This is now my blank canvas. What art do I want to create with it? Right. And you mentioned neuroplasticity. And
Mm.
if you can just quickly define neuroplasticity so that people
Yeah.
can understand the power of it.
Yeah. So very, very simply put, it's a lot of, okay. So if we, there's neurons in our brain. Think of it like there's like the old kind of, you had the old kind of clocks. Maybe, no, I shouldn't say it, maybe the old clocks, because a lot of people will understand these old type of clocks. I'm kind of getting older again this last year. But if we think of the neural networks in our brain, so for example, if we take it through language, if we said, just a word, all right, like, shop, or, or store, okay, people might go, okay, I hear one word, therefore one neural network is actually ignited. So there's like blood pushed towards it. It's listening, and what does it do? It probably visualizes a shop, or it memorizes a store or shop. Okay, but unless you put like a verb to it, like go shop, I get you. All right, I'll go to the shop. Okay, you usually want milk and bread. Fine, I'll get you milk and bread. So shop is one thing. that ignites a neural network. And like go shop is another thing. That involves activity. The two words together, shop and go, or go shop, either or, it's basic language, but it's not flashy, perfect, grammatical. It doesn't matter. What it does in your brain is it ignites two different lit up areas. Electricity and blood is firing to those neurons, right? Separately, shop and or store, the word store or shop, are firing one neural network. And then go is doing the other. But when you put the two together, they're creating two networks, and there's a synapse where the two of them are going, ah, and that's where when you think it's like the aha moment, right? Oh, okay, he wants to go and get bread and milk. Cool. And then like two words, imagine two little words together are opening this huge avenue of what can be done. So when our brains depreciate and they're the areas of our brain, you mentioned brain fog, really interesting. And again, this last year, a lot of people will and have, by the way, stopped using parts of their brains because if we take the social and connections part of our brains, our skills are gone. Our social skills for many of us. What are the social body language to do when we're listening? What are the things I need to do when I'm intrigued by somebody or I'm at least acting that I'm intrigued and so on? I want to be able to comfortably go into that social space now and be able to kind of use the words and listen and do my body language. What I used to do, I was an expert. I had charisma. I was brilliant at that. And now I'm nervous of doing it. Now I'm going into this area and I'm not so good at it. So believe it or not, all of those neural networks that we had before, they're gone. They're dead now. But the beauty about neuroplasticity is that you can absolutely create brand new neural networks. So, for example, when you think of Alzheimer's, Alzheimer's is depreciation of neural networks. And obviously, it's to do with memories and so on, and all of these things that are terrible, terrible things. However, even with Alzheimer's, there's ways now that they're discovering where you can recreate brand new neural networks. So you're building bridges. If I say go back to the shop, the word shop, and go, you're creating a synapse. It's like a bridge from one word to the next that will create either a visualization or a memory. So you can create, so if you're, for example, wondering or worrying about going out into society, going into workplace and seeing all the old crew, not being nervous, being a little bit agitated by all of those thinking, you can sit and you can visualize those things. And what that does then is you know what the office block looks like. You know what the bar or the public house or the football stadium looks like. You know what the tunnel, the last few seconds looks like. If you start seeing that and you start walking your way through that particular journey, you're you're creating brand new neural networks, physically brand new neural networks that are going on. So they're not actually, so all the things you did, even if you were always late for work or got nervous or whatever else happened, or you were always silly at getting up in the morning at 5 minutes late, that's gone. Those times are gone. These are brand new physical neural networks in your brain. So there's no reason logically to think that you're going to go back to the old habits you did before. So it's brand new. So why wouldn't you actually just grab hold of that and say, wow, this is science. This is physically different in my brain, and I can create it. I can create what I want to be tomorrow. That's amazing, I think.
Dr. Connor, this is probably my favorite part of the entire interview because right here, there was an aha moment for me. A light bulb went off. And as you're sitting there and talking about neuroplasticity and shop being a noun and go being a verb, and you put the two together, and there's this jump between the synaptic gaps in our brain. And now we have this visualization. It leads me back to thinking of affirmations. Like you can literally come up with statements that will help you undo how you're feeling right now. You can sit here and say, I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling isolated. And you're recreating that neural pathway. You're enforcing it. You're
Yeah,
making that trench deeper. Or you can sit there and say, I am strong. I am confident. I am resilient. I am connected. I am a lover of people and new experiences. And now I have the opportunity to go out there and recreate the life that I've always wanted to live. And now you're creating a new neural pathway.
Exactly.
And that's powerful.
Exactly.
And I think if no one takes anything else from this conversation, right there, how do we bounce back? From a neuroscientist, from a sociopsychologist, how do we, what's one nugget we could take away from Dr. Connor? It's the fact that you can sit here and just through language and just through your thoughts and just through the reprogramming of the things that you say, and not just using one word, but multiple words, you can create new neural pathways and beliefs, neuroplasticity, in order to change the way you perceive life, because this comes back to perception. And
Yeah.
it's in that perception that you change your awareness, your consciousness, and your total being.
Yep.
Mic drop.
Boom.
That was amazing.
Yeah. Well, this is it, and and you will fight that off. Of course you will, because you're like, oh my gosh,
It's like, it's
is
so
that,
weird. It's woo woo. Is
you
that
know?
real? But
But
it
the
is. It's the
reality is,
brain.
well, yeah. Well, here's the proof behind it as well, because you are if you the crowd that you join now, whether again it's a football match or you go to work and there's more than 10 people or whatever else, all of these people, this is factual. Like, if you want to be skeptical of this, right now, as I said, it's a level playing field. So it's the perfect time in the history of your life. And I can be quite confident in saying that to almost 7.5 billion people in this world, because everybody has been locked up in many ways in the last year, a very, very tough year. So you're going to go to a social outlet in some ways, and everybody is going to perhaps not do what you're choosing to do. So, like you say, I am confident. Better again, you are confident, because they will notice that you are more confident than the other 10 people in the office. Because you will be, one, because you are telling it to yourself, that others will think you are confident because you will be. And also because they're feeling as if, oh, I'm a little bit agitated, I'm a little bit nervous. I have been out of the social contact for the last year or so as well. So it's a perfect time now to reinvent yourself and live in the moment and just be that confident person that deep down was always there for you to be. Because we're not designed to lack confidence. We are like, look at little babies. They smile. They don't, you're walking down the street with your beautiful baby, and people just look at them and they go, oh, look at a beautiful baby. And what does the baby do? He reacts or she reacts. They smile. So it's delight. Confidence is a delightful thing. It's not arrogance. That's a totally different thing. Confidence rewards you for what you have the ability to be. So why not choose it?
Wow. Dr. Connor, I knew this was going to be an amazing conversation. I didn't know it was going to be this incredible. I am so blessed for you being here and joining us on the Failing Forward podcast. I know we've gone significantly over time, and I know you're a very busy man with a lot of things to do. I just wanted to go ahead and express to you my deep appreciation for your heart, for your authenticity, because some people are just listening to this conversation right now through Spotify, whatnot. But if they could see the visual and they could see your face, I can feel the energy of authenticity, of integrity, of passion, of purpose through your eyes. And I apologize that I didn't tell you to get your hair done and your makeup done and all those things ahead of time. It was a little surprise, right? You look incredible, by the way. But how can we stay in
I
touch?
know I do. Thank you. Well,
I
that's not
love that.
arrogant.
I love that. How can we stay in touch with you for those of us that are here and they're like, wow, this man is amazing, and this is totally different than therapy, this is totally different than other forms of coaching that people may have received? How can we get in touch with you to
Yeah,
learn
and
more about this brain?
I just want to say that with that, just on that, it's like it is totally different, because it's like if you meet somebody in your life, whoever they've been, maybe who's like, you kind of go, aren't they great? I wish I was like them. And then you kind of go home and you're like, you're annoyed. The reason why you're annoyed is because it's nothing to do with them. You can do what they've done. So it's like, pull yourself up, make the choices, and like, life is waiting for you. You do not want to look back on life. You've looked back, all of us have now in this past year or whatever else. You've you've done or not done with yourself, and perhaps regretted things you've done or not done. But do you want to look back in 10, 15, 20 years' time on your deathbed and think you haven't gone down that avenue of doing something you know you can do, that you're on this earth for doing? You have the capability of doing it, so why not do it? You can only fail, and then what happens? You actually fell forward, and you improve because you learn from it, because that's where brain works, isn't it? My website is docconnor.com. That's DOCCONOR.com, docconnor.com. I know you'll remember it because it's easy to remember.
It's a
And
good one. And we're going to put it in the show notes for you. So just go ahead
yeah,
and
cool.
slide down
Yeah.
in the show notes. You can go ahead and click on his website there. We'll put some other places that you can get a hold of him via social links and Clubhouse. I mean, he's hosting
Yeah,
some incredible conversations. You don't want to miss them.
absolutely. And there's one coming up that's going to be really good. And you know what? Without telling people too much about it, and there's a lot of people that aren't on Clubhouse. The vast majority of people aren't, and they're kind of going, "Oh my God, I want to go to Clubhouse." You'll be there soon, and we'll be there waiting for you. And if you're listening to either of us, we'll have you on stage. And I would love if you brought up this conversation, anything was said, because I know we could speak for hours on this and still be speaking and still be
Yeah.
learning and so on. So that is the future. And hopefully we can all do it together and we can learn together.
I want to reinforce that. It's about coming together in community with the word unity capitalized, UNITY. We are meant to connect. We are
Correct.
meant to serve one another because where you have an expertise, I have a different experience, I have a different story. And when we
Exactly.
come together and we share our stories of how we failed forward, here's what I did. I was in so much pain physically. Here's how I fixed myself. I was in so much pain mentally. Here's how I fix myself. When we come together and we share these stories of failures, this is how we save time. What I went through that it might take you 5 to 7 years to learn about. Let me shortcut that for you. Let me teach you what I learned in 5 to 7 years in a matter of moments. Let me answer your questions and help empower you and pour into you so that you can go out there and live your best life and not waste the next 5 to 7 years. That's what this connection is all about. Thank you, Dr. Connor, for being on the
Thank
Failing
you.
Forward podcast. I cannot wait for more conversations with you. Truly blessed and truly appreciative of you and your time. Thank
As
you.
am I. Thank you.
Thank you.